Happy Friday and welcome back to yet another episode of our Winked Unplugged, sessions that we do every Friday around challenges that we have as adults. Adulting challenges, things that don't let us be free, things that don't let us be joyful, and things that we all kind of navigate with, right? So today we're going to talk about another adulting challenge, and the one that we're going to talk about today is perfectionism. Are you a perfectionist? And what that might be doing to you. Working in corporate America for the longest time and leading very large teams, I would interview people and I would, as you were getting people on the team or hiring from outside, you ask them, your people's strengths and weaknesses. And so often people would talk about in their strengths that they were a perfectionist, right? And I understand. I often say I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I understand where they're coming from. And people would be so happy about being a perfectionist, right? And it is true. Being a perfectionist allows us to have a certain quality. It allows us to thrive. It allows us to achieve. It allows us to push our boundaries. But it also might have some downsides. So if you're wondering, is this talk for me? I don't know whether I'm a perfectionist. I'm a happy-go-lucky person and I'm okay with imperfection. I'm going to ask you a few questions and you see whether you say yes to maybe a couple of them, more than a couple of them, and that might give you a hint whether you're a perfectionist or not. So the first one is, do you have an exceptionally high standard of how certain things should be? Now, normally we're not perfectionists about everything. There might be certain things that we cue into. For me, for example, it's the way the house looks. It could also be the quality of the work. Those two are places that I feel that I'm super strong perfectionist and recovering from it. So figure out for yourself, are there areas in your life where you have a super high bar, right? And nothing less than perfect will do for you. The second one is, if things are not going perfectly in your mind, do you get angry and frustrated? Are you also the kind of person who walks into a room or is in the middle of a meeting or seeing a presentation and can spot that one thing that is wrong when everything else is right? Gives you a cue that you might be a perfectionist. Are you very critical? Right? Do you take time to celebrate the wins, or do you focus on a few things that could have gone better? Where is your mind? So if you just ask yourself these questions, you'll have a cue. Are you a perfectionist? Are you not a perfectionist? And in what areas of your life are you a perfectionist? Why are we talking about perfection? What does it do for us? Yes, on one side, it helps us. It pushes us, like I said before. But on the other side, it's also taking a huge toll on us. When we are so obsessed with perfection, we are constantly worried about the results and outcomes, right? We are looking at how it would be. We want it to be perfect. We are not in the moment. We are very outcome and result driven, right? And that takes away a lot of joy of just being in the moment, being spontaneous. I often think about this. You can either be joyful or you can be a perfectionist. Because when you are driving and thriving to be perfect, your vision is so narrow. You're kind of tunnel vision. You're not stepping back. You're not having the big picture. You might lose the forest for the trees. And there definitely isn't joy. Either joy can exist or perfection can exist. Just notice times in your life when you're very, very joyful, very happy, and you're laughing. At that time, whether things are perfect or not does not really matter. You don't even think of it. Your thought about perfection happens when you are not completely happy. It's crazy, but perfection, or the need for perfection, comes from not being comfortable right now. Right? So the first thing it takes away, like I said, is the joy of being in the moment. It completely takes, you're not there at all. Second, you're obsessing about results and narrow vision. So that's the second thing that happened. The third thing that happens, like I said, is maybe you get very short-tempered. Perfectionist, as you will see around you or you will see in yourself, is if things are not going perfectly in their minds, then they can get very frustrated, they can get angry, they can get critical. Guess what happens when you are angry, critical, frustrated? Do people want to be around you? It is rough on people around you. And I can say from personal experience, I am a perfectionist when it comes to the house. And I remember many, many years back, this was nearly 12, 13, 14 years back, I had colorful plates, dinner plates. They were colorful because I wanted some color in the house. And there were 4 different colors, right? And there were 12 plates. So 4 of each, 3 of each. And I spent a lot of time. That's another thing that perfectionists do. They spend a lot of time on details that don't really matter. And I spent so much time to kind of arrange them in certain sequence of colors because I thought that's what literally looked nice, right? In my kitchen cabinet. Like somebody was opening my kitchen cabinet and looking at the colors, but for me, that was really important. And so there was, a green. After the green had to be the yellow, from there the orange, and then the blue or whatever else. And, I went back and forth. That came up with that combination. Of course, the first one to be trained was my housekeeper. When you're doing the dishes, this is the way it has to be done. And if she didn't do it well, and she didn't do it in the colors that I wanted, guess what happened? Ruchika wasn't very happy about it. And then, of course, I got married, and Aniket got trained on how the colors had to be. And, life has a great sense of humor. They normally put a perfectionist with a person who really doesn't care about perfection, at least in the areas that you care about. They're completely, like their mind is not there at all. And Aniket couldn't care less about my colors, but of course he knew that Ruchika would get really mad and, would ask him why he didn't put in a certain color. So of course he did it. And I remember my mother-in-law was visiting us for the first time, and she was a little apprehensive. And I was wondering why she was apprehensive. And, she came in for the first couple of days. She was like, tiptoeing around and, looking at the way the spoons were kept and the plates were kept. And she was really like not herself. And then I got to know that my mom, thank you, Mom, had actually warned her saying, my daughter's a perfectionist when it comes to the colors of her plates. And she likes it in a certain order, and she likes the spoons in a certain way, knives in a certain way. And of course, yes, there's truth to it, but it puts people around you not at ease. It puts people around you as if they're on tiptoe because they're being judged and evaluated constantly. And if they don't live up to your idea of perfection, you might get mad, or there might be consequences, or you will not be pleased. So just notice the impact your perfectionism is having on people around you, the toll it might be taking on your relationships. So that's the fourth thing that happens. The fifth thing I can tell you, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to it, is exhaustion. Because as a perfectionist, you don't realize what is really important, what matters versus what doesn't. It's the 80-20 rule. Like, you know what? Good enough is okay. It does not need to be perfect. But we obsess so much about, okay, is the spoon kept properly? For me, is the lamp direction exactly the same? Should I move it just a tiny, 1 centimeter here? Nobody but me notices it. And is my time best spent doing something like that? Or even an email, right? Like I said, the second thing I'm working through is work. And when I'm responding to an email, of course, I want to be thoughtful. Of course, I want attention to detail. But how much time am I spending, thinking of my response and whether it's perfect and rewriting it and rereading it? How much time are we wasting? So just think of these 5 things that happen when you're a perfectionist. And then peeling back, which is what I love doing. Why are we perfectionists? Why are we striving for perfection? Have you ever stopped to think, yes, I'm a perfectionist. Yes, I do all of these things. Yes, it can take a toll on people around me and myself. But why am I driving myself and people around me so crazy? The first thing is it comes from fear. It could be fear of failure. It could be fear of disappointing people. It could be fear of not doing well enough. A fear of judgment. Does not matter. a lot of times perfection is coming from fear. Whereas when we do best in life is when life is an expression of love, expression of something that we love doing, right? Rather than being driven by fear. And just notice what happens when we're in fear. We're contracted. Imagine going through life in that contracted state constantly. The second thing that I think that perfection can come from is this need to control. At a very subtle level, we feel like if we can control it, life will be fine. And for those of us who can step back and think, how much of life do we really control? Maybe our thoughts, maybe not even our thoughts, maybe actions. But how much of life do we really control? But as a perfectionist, we have a huge interlinking with control. We tend to not cede control at all. That's why for a lot of perfectionists, delegating is really difficult because they feel like if they delegate, something will go wrong. But life has existed for such a long time before we won the planet, for billions of years. And hopefully life will continue for billions of years after we're gone. And we think we can control and perfect life. That to me is very, very interesting when I kind of step back. And the third thing is having lost perspective completely. In the moments of control or in the moments of driving control, we're not pulling back and seeing the magnanimity of life. And maybe even not recognizing the perfection that exists in life. It is our inability a lot of times to see the perfection, not that it does not exist. So just look to see what is driving your need for perfection. Yes, I'm just going to pause over there and see if there are any questions that are coming up. And for those of us who have identified ourselves as perfectionists in a certain area, just see this week you can let go a little bit of perfection. Even if it's 80% there, it's okay. Just let go. I know it might make you feel uncomfortable, but that is the way we start delinking this need for perfection and 100% there from our lives. And it also will allow us to be a lot more joyful. Yes, I'm just going to pause and see any questions that might be coming up right now. Calvin is asking, can we be perfectly fearless? When you're fearless, you don't care about perfection or imperfection at all. Fearlessness comes with so much courage and so much energy, right? Fearlessness is an expanded state. Fear is a contracted state. So yes, you can be perfectly fearless. That I'm sure you can be, but I don't know whether you can be a perfectionist and fearless at the same time. It's a great question. Anything else about perfection that is... Perfection, keeping a house gives me joy, which I don't think is fear. Yes, keeping a house which looks perfect, I understand, gives you joy. It gives me a lot of joy. Just see what happens when the house is not perfect. Does it take away the joy? If it doesn't, we're fine. But if the house not being perfect and every cushion not being in its place and everything not being dusted perfectly, and if the plant is not in the exact right angle, if that can still keep you joyful, then you're absolutely fine. But my guess might be that unless the house is perfect, it may not make you joyful. It's a great, great question. I think I have the same issue with the house, so I completely identify with that. Any other questions that are coming up around perfection? Okay, so if not, just notice that imperfection is coming from our need to control. It's coming from fear, and it's coming from our inability to see the perfection in ourselves, in life, exactly the way it is. So this week, let go of a little bit of perfection. We start taking baby steps, right? So if, something takes you much longer, you have to get it right to the nth degree, see if you can pull back a little bit and let us know how this week goes for you and how you're able to untangle a little bit with perfection. Great. So have a great weekend. We'll see you again next Friday. Till then, stay joyful.